Good evening. Welcome to this meeting of the Merrimack School Board this Monday evening, June 1st, 2015. Would you all rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Before we begin tonight, I have a few announcements. The first one is unfortunate. Recently, Ronnie Carlsberg, who you may know as the woman who sat behind us taking minutes of our meetings, passed away. So I would ask that we all observe a moment of silence. Thank you. And Dr. McLaughlin has some words to share about Ronnie.
Happy to do it. I would just say that I was very proud to represent the Merrimack School District at Ronnie's services in Nashua last week. And as is true with so many people, you know, we only know small parts of the people that come into our lives. And I learned quite a bit about Mrs. Carlsberg during that time when her family and friends were speaking about her. So I learned that she was a lady who really worked very hard in her community to support women and children, particularly who were in distress. And she worked very hard and tirelessly, both as in her professional life and in her private life, to support people in that situation. I also learned that she was a woman of great faith and that she worked very hard with folks in the religious community in Greater Nashua to support interfaith understanding, and many people spoke about her tireless efforts in that regard. I also know this to be true, that she loved children, and she loved nights like this when the students would come and to speak about their learning and their experiences, and so she did and would still love nights like this. And finally, she was a lady who suffered a number of losses in her personal life and always managed to be a good friend and a person with a great sense of humor and a smile despite that. So I think I certainly learned a lot of lessons about Mrs. Carlsberg, and we can only hope to be as kind as she was. So I'm happy to have represented the district.
Thank you for that, Dr. McLaughlin. She will be missed. One quick announcement. Board Member Schneider is excused from tonight's meeting. And then perhaps a slightly longer announcement, which is both happy and sad, so probably bittersweet in this regard. Tonight marks the last meeting for our student representative, Ms. Crowley. She is graduating from Merrimack High School and plans to attend UMass Amherst next year, where I'm sure she will do extremely well. Kira has served the school board and the high school as the student rep for the last 3 years, which I believe is the longest tenure of any student rep. And she's done a wonderful job in representing a student's point of view here at the table when we're discussing issues. She's been an excellent conduit for information back and forth between the student body and the board. So we wanted to thank her, wish her well at UMass Amherst next year, and let her know that she'll be missed. And as a token of our appreciation, we have a little card and a gift here that hopefully helps you to buy some books.
Before we move on, I just want to thank you all for this great opportunity. This has helped me understand more about our education system and the politics in our town. It's also helped me grow as a student and as a public speaker, and I just am so grateful for the opportunity to be involved with this program. Thank you.
Wonderful. You can see why we think she's going to do very well. And so now we will move on to our agenda. And item number 2 on that agenda is a focus on James Mastrocola Elementary School. I'll invite to the table Principal Emily Carter, Assistant Principal Michelle Romaine, and I suppose, should I introduce all of the students? Okay. Owen Clever, Toby Werner, Amelia Walker, and Regan Sullivan. Thank you for coming tonight.
Well, good evening, and thank you for allowing us this time to share some of the highlights from Mastrocola Elementary School. First, I'd like to introduce everyone who accompanied me here this evening, and I will, maybe when I say their names, you've already introduced them, but maybe I'll have them raise their hands. So to my right, I have Regan Sullivan, and then Amelia Walker. And over to my left, I have Toby Werner and Owen Clever. And then, of course, you all know Mrs. Romaine, who's the assistant principal. One of the things that we continue to hear is that parents and local communities should be involved in education. Many studies have shown that when parents and families are involved in their children's schools, their children do better. When local community members become involved, they act as role models, they act as mentors, and provide that additional layer of support and inspiration for students and teachers. So tonight we're focusing on some of the community connections that we enjoy throughout the entire school year.
This year was the beginning of what I hope will be a long-standing relationship with the Merrimack Water Department. Each year, the state holds a fair centered around educating students about water. This year's festival was held at Wasserman Park. Our new partnership with the Water Department brought 2 different components. The first was an all-day event at Wasserman Park. 4th graders from across the district gathered to learn all about one of our most valuable resources. Owen and Toby will give you more details on the festival.
When we got to the park, we put our lunches down at the basketball court, then we went to a music festival. The man played a guitar and sang about the earth elements. We sang a song and some students played shakers.
After the music, we were divided into groups. Each class was split in half. The groups went to different stations. At each station, there was something about water. There were volunteers from all over New Hampshire at each station. Usually the volunteers did experiments that we could observe. Some of them were really exciting. This station taught us about conserving water. The volunteer explained that some people only have 3/4 of a gallon of water per day. She then asked us to think about what we would do if we only had 3 quarts of water a day. We drew our ideas on a paper raindrop. I said that I would use mine for cooking and drinking.
Another station that we went to was a water filtering station. There were little coffee filters, an orange juice and apple juice container with the tops cut off. We took the coffee filters and filled them with dirt. Then we poured dirty water through the filter. At the bottom, the water should have been clear. Our group's water came out the same way it went in. The second time, we put more materials to absorb the dirt, and the water came out clearer.
Another exhibit we visited was about cleaning the water of bad chemicals. The volunteer used a poster to explain how they clean it. There's a filter in houses that have their own wells. There was also a station where you put paper in water, and then when the paper was wet, we set a paperclip on it to see if the paperclip would stay on, or fall off. We were learning about sinking and floating. One of the stations was a game. There was a wheel we spun, the pointer landed on a category, and the volunteer asked us a question on that category. If you answered the question right, you got a sticker.
Each school had a different poster, and every student signed their name and drew a picture of water. The posters were going to the water department. We really liked going to the festival because you learned a lot about water. I liked the different exhibits about different categories.
The second opportunity afforded to us through this partnership was the participation in a water science fair. This was the first year that MES has had a science fair, and this year's science fair was voluntary. The fourth grade classroom teachers did a number of experiments in the classroom about water, and then the students were given the opportunity to create an experiment. We held a water fair, science fair, during the afternoon, which parents were invited. The entire fourth grade came. We had 18 students participate. 8 of the projects were chosen to go to a second round, and then from those 8 projects, 4 were chosen and were presented at Wasserman Park the day of the water festival. And Owen and Toby have brought their experiment to share part of with you tonight.
Water has been used by people to help with their work for many, many years. One of the first things it was used for is in grist mills to grind flour. Today, water is used in creating hydroelectric power.
Moving water can be used to make energy. This is called hydroelectric energy. Water is stored behind a dam. When the dam opens, water flows through the propeller, called a turbine. The turbine turns, spinning the shaft in the generator, creating energy for people to use. This energy is then sent to homes and businesses. Hydroelectric power produces 12% of the United States energy.
In the past, grist mills have been used in Europe and the Middle East. Grist mills were used to grind grain, which would be used to make meals. The wheel that was turned from the water is a turbine, just like the turbine of a hydroelectric plant. This was one of the first ways people used moving water to help with the job.
To show how hydroelectric power works, we made a water wheel, which was squirted by the Super Soaker. The wheel's axle was connected to a motor. The motor was connected to a light bulb. The spinning axle powered the motor. The cords carried electricity to the bulb, so the bulb lit up. In our project, the Super Soaker was the water float, the wheel was the turbine, and the motor was the generator.
Hydroelectric energy is used throughout the world. If we could have changed something, we would have made the motor run more smoothly. We could have improved the paddles. We would also like a stronger water force. Even though our project didn't work very well, we hope you understand how hydroelectric power is made.
What they didn't tell you was their project was jostled bringing it in, and they did get it back together during the science fair right before the judges visited their table. However, we had a power outage right at that moment of the science fair, and somehow during that it got bumped again, and so their project did have some difficulties, and we asked if they could bring it tonight, and they couldn't quite bring it because Owen has actually taken it apart, and he used parts of it to build a home for a frog. So.
So we have some slides in the presentation for various community people that have come into the school, and we have recorded students' voices on them. So I'll play that now.
Merrimack policemen sign up to read to different classes. Sometimes a policeman comes to our school and he reads a story to us. Sometimes he talks about safety. When he's done, we say, "Wow, that's a great story." see sometimes the policemen come and eat lunch with us. We appreciate them coming. The Junior Fire Muster is a tradition in Merrimack. The 4th and 5th graders get to experience the challenges of being a firefighter. Each team has a firefighter coach and participates in different challenges. This year's Fire Muster was different than last year's Fire Muster because the teams had kids from all different schools. It was good because we got to meet other 4th and 5th graders. There were 4 different teams. There was F, I, R, and E. And the colors of the shirts were red, blue, yellow, and green. There were 3 different challenges. First, there was the dry hose connection, where we had to have a team to connect the hose to the hydrant and in the middle and to the nozzle. The bucket brigade was the second challenge. We had a bucket to fill with fake water, passing peanuts, and it was a relay race. We would zigzag through the cones until the bucket at the back was full. The third challenge was the midnight alarm. We had to dress up in a firefighter suit. It was a little difficult because the suit was very big and we had to run with it. If our hat fell, we had to go back and get it. This year, 2 teams were tied for first place, so all the teams had a tiebreaker. The tiebreaker challenge was the emergency assistance drill. We had to keep a monkey balance on a stretcher while leading through cones. The 2015 Junior Fire Muster was awesome. We got to meet firefighters and new friends. I hope next year you can be a part of it.
The next slide is about our connection with the Merrimack Public Library. And Miss Liz, who's the children's librarian, has come to our school on many opportunities, and we're developing a nicer relationship where she's doing quite a few things with us. So in the fall, she attends our ice cream social, and this is actually showing her with her table set up with all of her resources. And one of the most exciting things of this night is if a child does not have their library card, they can actually sign up for their first library card. So she has several customers on that evening. In the spring, then, she works with our language arts coordinator, and she plans to plan a kickoff for the summer reading program that takes place at the library. And she actually came today to Mastrocola to share with all of the students. And what she does is she came in and she gets dressed up in costumes. There's a theme every year, and she visits all of the children in the lunchroom and gets them really excited and wanting to go and participate to read over the summer. And then also during the summer, she helps out our Title I program. She provides a space for our Title I students to actually switch out their reading books. So at the end of the school year, Title I students they have leave with some books in a bag, and after reading them for so many times, they go to the library and they are able to swap them out, which is also really nice to get them into the library and then motivating with new stories. She also has begun to help us out with our Principal Story Hour. On one of the slides, she's reading A Good Day's Fishing, and then she's also performing a skit that was based on the library Gingerbread Man story. And that was one of our grand finales of our Principal Story Hour. It's a lot of fun. But it's really nice to have her there sharing her love for reading with the students, and hopefully to have them want to go to the library and check it out.
On baseball day, the Merrimack High School baseball team came to MES.
I forgot that was there.
First, we had a base.
Oh, wait. I don't know where that's going, but it's
So another connection that we value at MES is our connection with the Merrimack High School. And one of those connections is exemplified in front of you. It is the Merrimack High School varsity and junior varsity baseball day, in which the teams visit the 4th graders and play a few innings of a game. One of the really important and powerful items that comes out of baseball day is the conversations that the players have about sportsmanship and about the importance of doing well in school. And it was mesmerizing to watch our fourth graders just look up to these giant baseball players as they asked for their autograph and hang on to every word they said.
First, we had a baseball lunch of hot dogs, watermelon, and popcorn with the team. Before the game started, the players signed autograph books. While we waited, an old MES student juggled baseball bats. It was awesome. They told us to study in school and taught us how to be good sports. Good luck, Merrimack High School. Thank you for coming from the 4th grade.
Last year, the 1st graders went to Merrimack High School to look at the science experiments that my dad and his students did. The 2nd grade is doing it next week. My favorite experiment was the elephant toothpaste.
So James Davis is a science teacher at the Merrimack High School, and his daughter Annalise who is narrating there are several slides that she's going to narrate. She was in the 1st grade last year and is in the 2nd grade this year. And this has really started a new tradition for us between the high school and Mastrocola. And it was so successful that some of the students wrote some nice letters and sent them to Mr. Davis to say thank you. And so the narrators of the letters are also the students who wrote them. So that was neat. Let me see.
I learned about science. When I went to the high school, my favorite thing was the elephant toothpaste. I think it was made out of corn oil. I learned that if you put honey, syrup, soap, water, and oil in a cup, the most dense one will stick to the bottom of the cup. I learned that when water and salt get stirred, the salt goes away. I went to a place and then me, Alexis, and Nathan chose a liquid, and then we took a paper towel and then twisted it, and then we put them in our liquid. Then we saw which one was fastest. I learned that different types of salt could make different colors of fire, but you need sawdust. It was awesome.
And that's also integrating writing into science and things that the children are experiencing on a daily basis.
Speaking of writing, another connection we have is through the We Deliver program, which is designed to bring connections to elementary schools and the U.S. postal system. Some of the objectives of the We Deliver program are on the screen in front of you. The first being to form community partnerships that encourage supportive school programs. The students do learn the entire process of the postal system, as well as have a visit from the postmaster who comes and goes through the system with the students. It looks to give students real life experiences in writing with basic skills. It provides a student-centered communication system for all of our schools. Students often write letters to each other. They write letters to teachers. They write letters to parents, and parents can actually write letters to their children. It gives them an authentic opportunity to write, at least pen and pencil writing for the time being. And the students work the entire program. And in a minute, Amelia and Regan will walk you through the process of our We Deliver program. In addition, it also builds a sense of teamwork among the students. At MES, it's 2nd graders that run the We Deliver program with the help of parent volunteers. Each classroom has a certain amount of time in which they are the postmasters. So I will turn it over to Regan and Amelia to explain what it looks like at MES.
This is about MES We Deliver. The first step is to write letters to people in school or out of school if you want. When you are writing, you have to include details like if you watched a good movie or read a book and you want to tell them about it. If you're writing to a 3rd or 4th grader, you could tell them about a field trip that you went on if they haven't gone on that trip.
There's a special way to write the letters, so it is good to practice how to do it. Since you are going to mail the letter, it needs an address, the person's name, and your name needs to be on it too, so they know who it is from. When you are done writing the letter and have put the address on it, you fold it up and tape or staple it it can go through the mail.
After you write the letter, you go to the mailbox and put it in the slot. On Thursdays, the postmaster takes the letters out of the back of the mailbox and puts them into a white mail basket and then brings them all to room 23 to be sorted.
The sorters look at the address on the letter and put them into a right bin. Once all letters have been sorted, the parent volunteer paper clip each room's letters together and put them in the We Deliver sack so they are ready to be delivered.
The mail carriers pick up the We Deliver sack and deliver the letters. The parent volunteers help out too. The mail carriers go down each hall and put letters in the classroom mailboxes. The mail carrier also puts the You've Got Mail stick into the mailbox to let people know they have mail.
The last thing is that people get mail. They are excited to get mail. When they are ready, when they read the letter, it can fill their bucket and make them happy. They might take it home and they could write a letter back to them. We have one more delivery left today. It's for the town hall.
We
Hope you enjoy your mail.
This is exciting. We haven't gotten mail here before. Not sure what to do. Oh, I can take that for Mr. Schneider. Yep. You recognize we have to write back now. Please, is there mail for me? Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, ladies. Great job.
Can I make a quick comment?
Sure.
This is the first time that I've received We Deliver in probably 12 years. So thank you very much. I remember when both of mine took part in the program. It was so exciting for them to get mail there.
I think you're in for a big treat. I think you will really enjoy the letters.
I can't wait.
So with all of that said, we are very, very fortunate to have such strong connections in this town, and especially where we're located, where we can access the high school on a regular basis, and there's such wonderful role models and examples for our students. So I, at this point, would be happy to answer any questions that you might have for us.
Thank you so much. Are there any comments or questions from the board? No? I would first off, like to thank all of the presenters this evening, adults and children, for a wonderful presentation. I was familiar with some of the interactions with community organizations, but you opened my eyes to a number of them that I was previously unaware of. And I would just say this, as much as the students might benefit from the interactions with the high school, I've seen that there is a tremendous benefit as well to the high school in doing that program. The fact that baseball players on the JV or varsity team are even asked for an autograph throws them a little bit. Yeah. And I think that they realize that they're role models for someone else, and that's an important thing, and that they're setting an example. But there's a wealth of benefits that exist from these partnerships, and we're quite fortunate to have not only a few, but a very broad array of them. And so thank you for sharing them with us, and it was a wonderful presentation.
Thank you. Thank you.
And that will take us now, thank you, to item number 3 on tonight's agenda, the approval of the May 18th, 2015 minutes. Is there a motion? Made by Vice Chair Barnes, second by Davis. Mr. Powell, are there any amendments or corrections? Vice Chair Barnes.
On page 1, line 42, second sentence, student participated in, it says will participate, so strike the will. And actually I had a question, but it's not something I said, so I was hoping, Cindy, you could help on page 3. Lines 107 and 108. I have no idea what that means.
I think what I said, the spirit of what I said was about going back was the complexity of what it takes. I'm trying to refresh my memory on, I made a couple of comments, and I think that I was acknowledging some of the sentiments that had been expressed in the presentation, and it's amazing from when a student goes from being in 9th grade to a senior. I remember that being the sentiment of what I was saying.
It was just the wording. Just I didn't know if you're trying to say that it's apparent that community involvement is important to the school district school's culture, or just the wording just got me. I'm not
maybe
even sure
we
what
can
it was.
go back and
if we can take a look at what that was. Yeah. So, and that's the only one I couldn't get my hands around. So that was it.
All set. Any other amendments? Okay, seeing none, we will put the minutes to a vote. All those in favor of accepting the May 18th, 2015 minutes as amended, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions. So the minutes carry 202 with board members Powell and Ortega abstaining. And that will take us to item number 4 on tonight's agenda, public participation. This is an opportunity for the public to address the board. All we ask is that you come to the microphone and state your name and address for the record. Is there anyone looking to address the board under public participation? Seeing none, we'll close public participation and move to item 5. Acceptance of gifts or grants under $5,000. Business Administrator Chevano.
Thank you very much. This evening we have a very generous gift to the Merrimack High School Theater Department from the Lions Club of Merrimack in the amount of $1,000. And I'll read right from the form. The purpose of the gift is to support and sustain the Merrimack High School Theater Department's productions and to continue providing workshops and seminars by theater professionals for development of the students' acting, directing, and technical skills. Sorry about that. So $1,000 from the Lions Club of Merrimack, and we appreciate that. Thank you.
Very generous. Is there a motion made by Ms. Gualiumi to accept, seconded by Board Member Powell? All those, yes,
Oh,
go
I
ahead.
just wanted to say I'd like to accept the gift with our gratitude. I think it's a fantastic gift. I'm a strong supporter of the performing arts in our schools. Sometimes and often they're underrepresented in education. I often wish that I had more opportunities in that area as a young person. So anyways, I'd like to make a motion to accept the gift with our gratitude.
Wonderful. So with that, we'll put the motion to a vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. None. Any opposed? No. None opposed. The motion carries 4-0. And that takes us to item number 6 on tonight's agenda, the consent agenda. Dr. Mark McLaughlin.
Thank you. Under consent tonight, we have the following teacher nominations. Elizabeth Dodd, science teacher at Merrimack High School. April Doss, science special education teacher at Thorntons Ferry School. James Kyle Harville, science teacher at Merrimack High School. Mary Alice Perticchese, science teacher at Merrimack High School. Zoe Swalja, grade 6 teacher at Mastrocola Upper Elementary School. And Brian Tassini, comprehensive technology teacher at Merrimack Middle School. In addition, we have the following 2 resignations. Elena Ben-Karam, world language teacher at Merrimack High School, and Susan Treelor, 6th grade teacher at Mastrocola Upper Elementary School.
Thank you. Is there a motion? Mr. Powell.
I move we accept the consent agenda as presented.
And a second? Vice Chair Barnes. With that, we'll put the consent agenda to a vote. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? None. That motion carries 4-0-0. Which takes us now to item number 7, presentation regarding use of physical restraint / seclusion policy. I'll invite to the table our Director of Special Education, Mr. John Fabrizio, and with him, Mr. Dean Eggert. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here tonight.
Thank you and good evening. This is tonight's an overview of beginning of one of our policies that we need to put forward, and it's the use of physical restraint and seclusion. And Dean Eggert, attorney that represents our district, is here to kind of help give an overview of why the law, where it came from, and kind of the particulars of that. And then after that, the next item on the agenda is to look over our policy and do our first reading, hopefully. And please feel free to ask questions or dig further if there is some things. This is a policy that was done by committee. We had representatives across the district from all the elementary schools, the middle, the high, and also all our behavior specialists and school psychologists that work with us to try to help us come up with something that meets the letter of the law, but also stays true to the safety and the well-being of our children here in Merrimack. So, Dean?
I think I'm on now. Can you hear me now? Great. Well, I'm Dean Eggert. I'm with the firm of Wadley, Starr, and Peters. And tonight you're here to begin your discussion at the board level and your first reading of a proposed policy, JKAA. As a board member, probably the first question you would ask is, what's the genesis of this policy? Where does it come from? And this policy, unlike many policies, actually comes from a statutory requirement. RSA 126U was adopted by our legislature initially in 2010. Recently, in 2014, it was the subject of broad amendment. RSA 126U at that point was amended to graft onto it a policy requirement. Merrimack is not unique. Every district across the state is required by statutory law now to adopt a policy under RSA 126U. So you may then ask, well, what does this policy address? And as you see at the top of the policy, it talks about 2 subjects, but actually it also addresses a third. It talks about the circumstances under which one engages in restraint. That is restraint of students, not emotional restraint or restraint of one's actions, but restraint of children. The second subject that it addresses is when is it proper, when is it improper to ever seclude a child from, say, the classroom setting. And then the third one that is entirely new is this idea of addressing the question of what do you do when there's been intentional physical contact with a child. And not just any intentional physical contact, not the hug, not the handshake, but intentional physical contact designed to what? Correct behavior, to change direction of a child, to change their behavior. There's some urban myths that you probably have already heard circling around with regard to this policy. The first myth that I think people have heard is that this means that we can no longer protect a child, keep them safe. This means that we can no longer, when appropriate, restrain a child or take actions to protect other children. Indeed, far from the opposite, this statute actually provides guidelines for when it's proper to engage in restraint. Prior to the requirement that we adopt policies, your teachers, your educators were essentially placed in the field and asked to exercise their own judgment as to what was proper or improper restraint. So the first urban myth that I might dispose of is that this is not a prohibition against restraint. This statute is not a prohibition against seclusion. It is not a prohibition against intentional physical contact. It's simply legislating the type of restraint, the type of seclusion that would be unsafe for a district to ever engage in with regard to any child. Examples such as prohibiting restraint that would make a child unable to safely breathe, or leaving a child in unmonitored seclusion. Well, I can assure you that the Merrimack School District would never engage in those practices. So there's nothing new in Merrimack, if you will, about what you're confining yourself to with regard to restraint, because the type of practices that are legislated out were unsafe practices to begin with. The next myth that comes right behind that is the idea that somehow this prohibits those activities of necessary restraint, necessary seclusion, necessary contact. And that's not really the case. This statute is all about, and your required policy out of it, is all about providing parents with notice when it occurs. So the statute is not so much saying you can't restrain a child, you cannot seclude a child, you cannot, when necessary, have this contact, but parents ought to know when it occurs. They shouldn't have to ask their child what happened when there's been this event of restraint or seclusion. Instead, the policy, the primary focus of the policy is actually to ensure that parents are timely informed when their child is the subject of restraint or seclusion. The third component is the idea that this statute, in terms of myths, might create new liability. In fact, we saw swirling around in some of the media accounts suggestions that educators would be fearful to restrain a child, or fearful to engage in seclusion, or fearful to engage in contact. Actually, if you look at the statute and you look at the policy, it should give far more comfort, because it informs educators when it's appropriate, when it's inappropriate. And in that same vein, if you think about it for a moment, from the perspective of every aspect of the law, it is when people fail to act that they create liability for a school district. When they act, and even when they act and they don't get it 100% correct, then all the legal doctrines come in that protect our educators, that protect our districts, such as the Good Samaritan doctrine and the forms of sovereign immunity that exist when you act. And in fact, if you were to analyze every case in New Hampshire that has resulted in district liability, and there are very few, they all seem to focus around instead the circumstances when educators failed to act. And so, if anything, I would say the other component of this policy is that it informs your educators about when it's appropriate to intervene, to restrain, to seclude, gives them guidelines for that, and then also when it's appropriate to have contact, intentional contact to protect children. The other things that this policy does, and the statute does, is it sets limits to the nature of restraint in terms of duration and the nature of seclusion in terms of duration, and provides for that second opinion of eyes on from your building level administrator. In other words, it takes any risk of prolonged restraint out of the picture without monitoring, any risk of prolonged seclusion without monitoring. Once again, designed fundamentally to protect what? To protect children, to provide your educators with guidelines, and to ensure that parents are informed. When I travel around the state and speak at conferences regarding this new law, it is fundamentally our opinion that a lot of the things that have been said about this law are just plain not true. That fundamentally it exists to provide the comfort of guidelines for educators, the comfort for parents that when this does occur, that they're going to be told that there had to be an event of restraint, had to be an event of seclusion, or in order to protect a child, there was intentional physical contact. So if anything, in our world of education, we certainly are looking for the safe harbors in terms of best practices. The last thing I want to leave you with, and I hope when I say this, that I in no way suggest that the task of a board is not absolutely critical in adopting a policy. It is very significant. But you may recall that about 2 years ago you adopted a pupil safety and violence prevention policy or an anti-bullying policy. Every single component of that policy was already in the statutory law. And to give you a little bit more comfort as a board, as you review JKAA tonight, while it may contain some elements of best practice in Merrimack, 99.7% of policy JKAA is iterating what's required by way of policy content in the statute. It reflects a trend that we're seeing with the legislature where they say two things that are almost sort of amusing. They say, local school district, you must all adopt a policy, and by the way, this is exactly what it will say. So I wouldn't ask you to agonize too much about it, and as you review and have your first reading, if you will, the focus would be more on asking John and the committee members, well, what would be the best practices in terms of how we'll handle our internal reporting forms, how we'll make sure that parents are timely notified? Because you really will find that you don't have the latitude, for example, to say, well, I really wish we could engage in this type of restraint or this type of seclusion if it was already legislated out of the picture. So I'll keep that short and be glad to answer any questions you may have tonight as a board. Typically, I think once you do get into the policy, recognize that it's statutorily mandated and understand that in Merrimack, you've been complying with this policy, whether you knew it or not, for years, because essentially it's all best practice. So that would be probably the short version of what usually takes me an hour.
Got a quick audience here, hopefully. Any questions? Mr. Powell.
Yes, just a couple. First of all, thank you for coming tonight and giving us that Cliff Notes version. It is most appreciated. John, can you tell me who, not specifically who, but what the makeup of the committee was that that came up with this?
Yeah. I had a representative from the administrative team. I had myself, 2 assistant principals, a principal, then I had a special ed coordinator, 2 behavior specialists, 3 behavior specialists, excuse me, a school psychologist. I think that's it.
No parents?
No parents.
Was there a reason for that?
It's based on the old, we brought the committee together, the original policy that was in place over a year ago.
Mm-hmm.
It said will be reviewed by committee, and it was the same committee that began, same positions that began with that, and we carried it forward into the new policy.
Okay, all right. And the second question that I have is, I'm assuming this, maybe if I assume I'm wrong, but this is going to be for any student in the district, not just students that are part of your department.
All students in the district.
Okay. And the only reason I ask is because it specifically brings out IEPs, 504s, everything like that. it doesn't, well, I guess we can get into that when we go through the reading, but that's all the questions I have for now. Thanks.
Ms. Guglielmi.
Just a quick question regarding the committee. Was it unanimously agreed upon? The group that?
There wasn't a vote on this. It's
Okay.
something we developed together, we edited together, we brought forward together, then agreed upon. It looked where we wanted to go to leadership. Then it went to leadership.
No, that's fine.
It was vetted through leadership and then brought forward to that point.
Okay,
That's
so
the
across-
process we typically go through. when we do
Across
something
kind of
forward.
a team effort. Okay.
Vice Chair Barnes.
So it's actually more for Attorney Eggert. If I went to any district in the state, it would almost look the same, is essentially what I'm saying, the policy, as long as they're current on their policy manuals?
That's correct. The acronym here, or the lettering, JKAA, would be the same lettering you would find in every district. And the districts have worked collaboratively to ensure that they didn't deviate from the statutory norm. So I have a strong suspicion that if you go to any of your peer districts, you will find that they're adopting a very similar policy. The only way they sometimes differ, and in my experience, and we've looked at probably 20 policies now for school districts on this area, is in their internal reporting forms. That's about the only significant difference, because when you think about it, each district has their own style and method that they like to report internally, but that's the only difference. And even there, many times the forms are identical. So the short answer is yes.
And the reasoning for my question was we have a lot of tech ed programs where we send kids to other districts. So kind of seeing if they were in a different district, whether they would be kind of saying the same expectations. So that's excellent. So thank you very much.
Excellent. Any other questions? I find it interesting too, the trend in Concord, right, about local school districts. You know, you must have a policy. It's the same group, however, that will tout the benefits of local control, right? And so
Right. Local control, as long as we can define what it'll look
as
like.
long as, yeah, exactly. But thank you. This presentation, I think, helps. All of us have had our packets and have gone through the, I don't know how many pages of policy that are there, 9 pages of policy, which we're about to get into. But understanding the genesis and what because you're right, there have been an awful lot of myths floating around about the new legislation. It was very helpful to get your perspective and to clarify that. So I very much thank you for doing that.
Thank you for inviting me, and I wouldn't have missed the first half of the meeting. It was great.
Wasn't that great?
It was exciting, and
Absolutely.
congratulations to you. You are already an accomplished speaker. I'm sure you'll do well. So. Thank you.
Thank you. And that will now take us then to item number 8, not surprisingly, first reading of restraint/seclusion policy. And I'll turn to the superintendent to introduce the policy.
Thank you. So before I begin, I just want you to know that as John and I have conferred, our intention would be the first reading tonight, the second reading June 15th, the third reading and hopefully adoption would be coming in July. The bottom line is if you need more time for this particular policy, our hope would be that we'd have it put together by September. So we really have a good amount of time to take it under advisement. If you also feel that you need to go beyond that, the beauty is that we are connected to the Wadley Law Firm, and so Attorney Eggert would be at our disposal if we need him. So what we thought might be helpful tonight, because this is probably our longest policy, is that we are going to display it while at the same time we read it. John is going to begin by reading the first 2 pages. Matt will read page 3 and 4. Mark will read 5 and 6, and I will be at the end. We felt that by changing voice, that might be helpful to this. But we also felt that this was a very important policy for our public, our parents and our public to know about and so on. So we want to do due diligence with this, even though it is longer than some.
I'm going to need 1 second. I apologize.
No problem at all. We'll take a breath here.
So I will. I'll begin by also talking that what I failed to mention is that I've also been working with Dean Eggert and Allison Munitelli, who are our lawyers at Wadley Starr and Peters law firm, to really pare down, which is an interesting word, of 9 pages of a policy, but it was previously about 13 to 14 pages, and that's as he mentioned, it is probably about 97% right now the flavor of the law. What we had in here prior to, in the old policy too, was a lot of information about Merrimack and what we did in Merrimack, and a lot of it dove more into procedure and process that we'll get to in the future. But right now, for policy, what's required is within what you'll see here tonight. So I'll begin. In the Merrimack School District, authorized staff members use physical restraint and seclusion in limited situation. In addition, it is expected that the school staff will implement positive and constructive methods to de-escalate potentially dangerous situations prior to any use of physical restraint or seclusion. Preventive strategies. To the extent possible, the Merrimack School District will collaborate with the parents and guardians to identify appropriate and effective techniques for supporting positive student behavior. This shall include all strategies identified in the formal plans, such as individual education plans, IEPs, 504 accommodation plans, and other behavioral intervention plans. Additionally, the parent and guardian will be asked to share the relevant information with the school personnel and conduct assessments for students who may cause potentially dangerous situations. Ultimately, it is the responsibility of the district to provide for safety for all students. The general welfare and the safety of both the student and the others must be considered at all times. In dangerous situations where the student can cause serious, probable, and immediate bodily harm to himself or to others, restraint or seclusion may be used. The Merrimack School District will provide the parent or guardian with a copy of the policy and the procedures for the use of physical restraint and seclusion. Definitions: RSA 126U1 amended 9/30/2014. 1. Child means a person who has not reached the age of 18 years or who is under the adult criminal prosecution or sentences of actual incarceration resulting therefore in, either due to having reached the age of 17 or due to the complication of proceedings for transfer to the adult criminal justice system under RSA 169B24, RSA 169B25, or RSA 169B26. Child also includes a person actually attending at school who is less than 22 years old of age and who has not received a high school diploma.
Mr. Fabrizio?
Yeah.
Can you just scroll the...
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Multitasking, I apologize.
Yeah. I don't envy you.
So, definition... So 2, restraint means bodily or physical restriction, medical devices or any other devices that immobilizes a person or restricts the freedom of movement of the torso, head, arms, legs. It also includes mechanical restraint, physical restraint, and medication restraint used to control the behaviors in an emergency and or involuntary medication. It is limited to actions taken by a person whose school district staff, contractors, or others otherwise under the control or direction of the Merrimack School District. Medication restraint occurs when a child given medication involuntary for a purpose of immediately control of the child's behavior. Mechanical restraint occurs when a physical device or devices are used to restrict the movement of a child or the movement of normal function portions of his or her body. Physical restraint occurs when manual method is used to restrict the child's freedom from movement and normal access to his or her body. I'm sorry, I have the wrong version here. You know what? No, it's not. I pulled the wrong version up. Excuse me for 1 second. I apologize. see multiple drafts. I apologize for this. Oh, we're going best we can. We're going to do this. There we go. So, restraint shall not include the following: brief touching or holding to calm, comfort, or encourage or guide a child, so long limitations of the freedom of movement of the child does not occur. A temporary holding of a hand, wrist, arm, shoulder, or back for purposes of encouraging a child to stand if necessary, then walk to a safe location, so as long as the child is upright in position and moving towards a safe location. Physical devices such as orthopedical prescribed appliances, surgical dressing and bandages, and supportive body bands, or other physical holding when necessary for routine physical examinations, tests, or orthopedic, surgical, or other similar medical treatment purposes, or when used to provide support for the achievement of functional body positions or proper balance, or to protect the person from falling out of bed, or permitting a child from participating in activity without the risk of physical harm. Serious injury. Means a harm to the body which requires hospitalization as or a result of fracture of a bone, non-superficial lacerations, injuries to an internal organ, second or third degree burns, or a severe, permanent, or protracted loss of impairment of the health and function of any part of the body. Seclusion means, so number 5, seclusion means the involuntary placement of a child alone in a place where where no other person is present, and from which the particular child is unable to exist, unable to exit, either due to physical manipulation by a person, a locked or other mechanical devices or barrier. The term does not include voluntary separation of a child from a stressful environment for purpose of allowing the child to regain self-control. One such separation is to an area which the child is able to leave. The seclusion does not include circumstances where there is no physical barrier between the child and any other person, or the child is physically able to leave the place. Circumstances may be considered seclusion even if a window or other device of physical obstruction is present, if there is elements of definition, if all this elements of this definition is satisfied. Intentional physical contact means contact by a school employer or child in response to a child's aggression, misconduct, misbehavior, and includes but is not limited to blocking or blow, a forcible release or grasp, or other significant intentional physical contact. The child demonstrates disruptive or assaultive behavior. Intentional physical contact does not include escorting a child from an area by ways of holding the hand, wrist, arms, or shoulders, or back, inducing the child to walk in a safe location unless the child actively combative, assaultive, or self-injurious while being escorted. Intentional physical contact does not include actions such as separating a child from each other, directing a child to stand, or otherwise physically preparing a child to be escorted. Intentional physical contact does not include incidental or minor contact such as for purposes of gaining non-compliance attention.
Yep. D, the use of seat belts, safety belts, or similar passenger restraints during the transportation of a child in a motor vehicle. E, the use of force by a person to defend himself or herself or a third person from what the staff member reasonably believes to be the imminent use of unlawful force by a child, when the actor uses a degree of such force which he or she reasonably believes to be necessary for such purpose, and the actor does not immobilize a child or restrict the freedom of movement of the torso, head, arms, or legs of any child. Section C, physical restraint may only be used in emergency situations only when the following conditions exist. Number 1, physical restraint shall only be used to ensure the immediate physical safety of persons when there is a substantial and an imminent risk of serious bodily harm to the child or others. The determination of whether the use of restraint is justified under this section may be made with consideration of all relevant circumstances, including whether the continued acts of violence by a child to inflict damage to property will create a substantial risk of serious bodily harm to the child or others. Physical restraint will only be used by trained personnel using extreme caution when all other interventions have failed or have been deemed appropriate. Number 2, restraint shall never be used explicitly or implicitly as punishment for the behavior of a child. Number 3, the use of restraint is limited to physical restraint and mechanical restraint when necessary for the safe transport of pupils as described in Section L of this policy. Number 4, restraint shall only be used when all other positive interventions have failed or the level of immediate risk prohibits exhausting other means. Number 5, staff authorized to utilize restraint will be trained in the Nonviolent Crisis Intervention Program, CIP, in parens, and or its equivalent as determined by the superintendent of schools or his/her designee. A team approach should be used, when possible, in situations that involve restraint. Untrained staff is prohibited from utilizing restraint and is limited to physically intervening by using the minimal amount of physical contact with the student to protect the student and ensure the safety of others until trained staff is available. D, authorization and monitoring of extended restraint, RSA 126-U:11. Number 1, a child in restraint shall be continuously and directly observed by school personnel trained in the safe use of restraint. Restraint shall not be imposed for longer than necessary to protect the child or others from the substantial and imminent risk of serious bodily harm. Page 4, number 3. No period of restraint of a child may exceed 15 minutes without the approval of a supervisory employee designated by the principal to provide such approval. A, no period of restraint of a child may exceed 30 minutes unless a face-to-face assessment of the mental, emotional, and physical well-being of the child is conducted by a supervisory employee designated by the principal who is trained to conduct such assessments. The assessment shall also include a determination of whether the restraint is being conducted safely and for a purpose authorized under RSA 126-U. Such assessments will be repeated at least every 30 minutes during the period of restraint. Each such assessment will be documented in writing, and such records will be retained by the facility or school as a part of a written notification required under RSA 126-U:7, paragraph 3 and section J of this policy. E, prohibition of dangerous restraint techniques, RSA 126-U:14. Use of the following restraint and behavior control techniques is prohibited, : Number 1, any physical restraint or containment technique that, A, obstructs a child's respiratory airway or impair the child's breathing or respiratory capacity or restricts the movement required for normal breathing. B, places pressure or weight on or causes the compression of the chest, lungs, sternum, diaphragm, back, or abdomen of a child. C, obstructs the circulation of blood. D, involves pushing on or into the child's mouth, nose, eyes, or any part of the face, or involves covering the face or body with anything, including soft objects such as pillows, blankets, or washcloths, or E, endangers a child's life or significantly exacerbates a child's medical condition. Number 2, the intentional infliction of pain, including the use of pain inducement to obtain compliance. 3, the intentional release of noxious, toxic, caustic, or otherwise unpleasant substances near a child for the purpose of controlling or modifying the behavior or of punishing the child. Number 4, any technique that unnecessarily subjects the child to ridicule, humiliation, or emotional trauma. Section F, risk of restraints. All physical restraints involve some risk. This may include injury, including rare instances, death to the person being restrained and or to the staff. Restraint-related position asphyxiation or other physical injuries can occur. For this reason, it is essential that the staff is trained in appropriate techniques that minimize the possibility of risk. 2, there is also the risk of psychological impact using restraints. An individual's past experience with abuse or the fear involved with being restrained may cause unanticipated responses. Staff should be aware that for some students the use of physical restraint might have the unintended consequence of acting as a positive reinforcer for their behavior. On to page 5.
3. In addition, employees of the Merrimack School District should be conscious of individual perceptions, experiences, and cultural orientation, and recognize that for some students, any touching may be unwelcome and misinterpreted despite good intentions. In these situations, touching the student may evoke an extreme and intense response and make the use of restraint more dangerous for both student and staff. RSA 126-U:10 and RSA 126-U:12. G. Limitation on the use of seclusion. RSA 126-U:5-A. 1. Seclusion may not be used as a form of punishment or discipline. It may only be used when a child's behavior poses a substantial and imminent risk of physical harm to a child or to others, and may only continue until that danger has dissipated. 2. Seclusion shall only be used as a last resort by trained personnel after other attempts to control the behavior have been attempted and been unsuccessful, or are reasonably concluded to be unlikely to succeed based on the history of actual attempts to control the behavior of a particular child. 3. Seclusion will not be used in a manner that unnecessarily subjects the child to the risk of ridicule, humiliation, or emotional or physical harm. H. Conditions of seclusion. RSA 126-U:5-B. 1. Seclusion may only be imposed in rooms which A. are of a size which is appropriate for the chronological and developmental age, size, and behavior of the children placed in them. B. Having a ceiling height that is comparable to the ceiling height of the other rooms in the building in which they are located. C. Are equipped with heating, cooling, ventilation, and lighting systems that are comparable to the systems that are in use in the other rooms of the building in which they are located. D. Are free of any objects that poses a danger to the children being placed in rooms. E. have doors which are either not equipped with locks or are equipped with devices that automatically disengage the lock in case of an emergency. For the purpose of this subparagraph, an emergency includes but is not limited to 1. The need to provide direct and immediate medical attention to a child. 2. Fire. 3. The need to remove the child to a safe location during a building lockdown. Or 4. Other critical situations that may require immediate removal of a child from seclusion to a safe location. F. Are equipped with unbreakable observation windows or equivalent devices to allow safe, direct, and uninterrupted observation of every part of the room. 2. Each use of seclusion will be directly and continuously, visually, and auditorially monitored by a person trained in the safe use of seclusion. I. Training. 1. The Merrimack School District shall ensure all appropriate personnel are trained in the use of physical restraint procedures and seclusion. Staff is trained in the Nonviolent Crisis Intervention Program, CPI, and or its equivalent as determined by the superintendent of schools or his or her designee. J. Reporting requirements and parental notification, RSA 126-U:7. Appropriate personnel will use the following protocol after each incident. 1. The staff member involved should verbally notify the principal or his or her designee as soon as possible. 2. Unless prohibited by a court order, the principal or his or her designee will verbally notify the parent, guardian, and guardian ad litem no later than the time of the return of the child to the parent or guardian or the end of the business day, whichever is earlier. Notification will be made in a manner calculated to give the parent, guardian actual notice of the incident at the earliest practicable time. 3. The staff members involved with the physical restraint or seclusion will have the opportunity to meet with his or her supervisors after the incident. The purpose of the meeting is to have the staff process the incident, assessing precipitating factors that led to the physical restraint or seclusion, and look at what could have been done to prevent the restraint or seclusion. The supervisor will provide support to the staff member and determine when the staff members shall return to his or her duties. 4. The superintendent is authorized to develop a reporting form or other documents necessary to satisfy these reporting requirements. A Merrimack School District employee who uses physical restraint or seclusion, or if the employee is unavailable, an administrator supervisor of such employee shall, within 5 business days after the occurrence, submit a written Merrimack School District restraint or seclusion report containing the following information to the principal or his or her designee and the superintendent. A. The date, time, and duration of the use of restraint or seclusion. B. A description of the actions of the child before, during, and after the occurrence. C. A description of any other relevant events preceding the use of physical restraint or seclusion, including the justification for initiating the use of physical restraint or seclusion. D. The names of the persons involved in the occurrence.
E. A description of the actions of the faculty or school employees involved before, during, and after the occurrence. F. A description of any interventions used prior to the use of the physical restraint or seclusion. G. A description of the seclusion or physical restraint used, including any technique hold used and the reason the technique hold was necessary. H. A description of any injury sustained by and any medical care administered to the child, employees, or others before, during, or after the use of physical restraint or seclusion. I. A description of any property damage associated with the occurrence. J. A description of actions taken to address the emotional needs of the child during and following the physical restraint or seclusion incident. K. A description of future actions to be taken to address the child's problem behaviors. L. The name, names, and position of the employee completing the report. M. The anticipated date of the final report. 5. Unless prohibited by court order, the superintendent or designee will, within 2 business days of receipt of the notification required in the above paragraph, send by first-class mail to the child's parent guardian and the guardian ad litem the information contained in the notification report. Each notification report prepared under this section will be retained by the school for review in accordance with rules adopted under RSA 541-A by the State Board of Education and the Department of Health and Human Services. A copy of reports and communications will be placed in the student's file. 6. School review following the use of restraint or seclusion. Upon information that restraint or seclusion has been used for the first time upon a child with a disability as defined in RSA 186-C:2 Roman numeral 1, or a child who is receiving services under Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, 29 U.S.C. Section 701, and its impending regulations, the school shall review the individual education program and/or Section 504 plan and make such adjustments as are indicated to eliminate or reduce the future use of restraint or seclusion. A parent or guardian of a child with a disability may request such a review at any time following an instance of restraint or seclusion, and such request shall be granted if there have been multiple instances of restraint or seclusion since the last review. 7. Whenever a school employee has intentional physical contact with a child, which is in response to a child's aggression, misconduct, or disruptive behavior, a representative of the school will make reasonable efforts to promptly notify the parent guardian. Such notification will be made no later than the time of the return of the child to the parent or guardian or the end of the business day, whichever is earlier. A. Notification of intentional physical contact is not required. Roman numeral 1. When a child is escorted from an area by way of holding of the hand, wrist, arm, shoulder, or back to induce the child to walk to a safe location. However, if the child is actively combative, assaultive, or self-injurious while being escorted, the intentional physical contact notice requirement shall apply. Roman numeral 2. When actions are taken such as separating children from each other, including a child to stand or otherwise physically preparing a child to be escorted. Roman numeral 3. When the contact with the child is incidental or minor, such as for the purposes of gaining a misbehaving child's attention. However, blocking a blow, forcible release from a grasp, or other significant and intentional physical contact with a disruptive or assaultive child will be subject to the intentional physical contact notice requirements. Roman numeral 4. When an incident constitutes restraint or seclusion and is subject to the notification requirements set forth above. B. When notification is required, the school shall, within 5 business days of the occurrence, prepare a written description of the incident. The written description shall include at least the following information. 1. The date and time of the incident. 2. A brief description of the actions of the child before, during, and after the occurrence. 3. The names of the persons involved in the occurrence. 4. A brief description of the actions of the facility or school employees involved before, during, and after the occurrence. 5. A description of any injury sustained by and any medical care administered to the child, employees, or others before, during, or after the incident. K. Serious injury or death during incidents of restraint or seclusion. Parenthetical, RSA 126-U:10, Roman numeral 2. Number 1, in cases involving serious injury or death to a child subject to restraint or seclusion in a school, the superintendent or designee will, in addition to the provisions of RSA 126-U:7, in parens, described in Section J of this policy, end parens, notify the Commissioner of the Department of Education, the Attorney General, and the Disabilities Rights Center, the state's federally designated protection and advocacy agency for individuals with disabilities. Such notice will include the written notification required in RSA 126-U:7, Roman numeral 2. L. Transportation. The school district will not use mechanical restraints during the transportation of children unless case-specific circumstances dictate that such methods are necessary. 2. Whenever a child is transported to a location outside the school, the superintendent or designee will ensure that all reasonable and appropriate measures consistent with public safety are made to transport or escort the child in a manner which A, prevents physical and psychological trauma, B, respects the privacy of the child, and C, represents the least restrictive means necessary for the safety of the child. 3. Whenever a child is transported using mechanical restraints, the superintendent or designee will document in writing the reasons for the use of the mechanical restraints. Such documentation shall be treated as notification of restraint under Section J of this policy. M. Annual review process. 1. The Merrimack School Board will annually review its written policy and procedures regarding the use of restraint and seclusion. 2. The superintendent of schools or his or her designee is authorized to establish procedures and create forms for managing the behavior of children. Such procedures shall be consistent with this policy and all applicable laws. The superintendent is further authorized to establish any other procedures and forms necessary to implement this policy and/or any other legal requirements. A. The superintendent of schools or his or her designee shall ensure that all relevant personnel are aware of the district use of physical restraint, seclusion policy, and procedures. B. Principals will annually identify staff members who serve as school-wide resources to serve on a committee to assist in ensuring proper administration of physical restraint and/or seclusion. The database is maintained by CPI trainers in each building. C. Committee shall review, at a minimum, the following components related to the use of restraint. These include an analysis of the following components. 1. Incident reports. 2. Procedures used during physical restraint, including the proper administration of specific district-approved physical restraint techniques. 3. Preventative measures or alternatives tried, techniques or accommodations used to avoid or eliminate the need of future use of physical restraint. 4. Documentation and follow-up of interventions made to eliminate the need for future use of physical restraint. 5. Injuries occurred during a physical restraint. 6. Notification procedures. 7. Staff training needs. 8. Specific patterns related to staff or student incidents. And 9. Environmental considerations, including physical space, student seating arrangements, and noise levels. 3. Upon review of the data, the committee shall identify any issues and/or practices that require further attention and provide written recommendations to the superintendent of schools. 4. The committee can recommend review of the training program to ensure the most current knowledge and techniques are reflected in the district's policy of physical restraint and seclusion. The legal reference is RSA 126U.
Thank you. It's a mouthful. Are there any comments or questions on the first read of the policy? Mr. Powell.
A clarification, and maybe I'm just not able to wrap my head around it, but on page 1 under letter A, prevention strategies, down the first paragraph down to the last sentence, additionally, the parent guardian will be asked to share relevant information with school personnel and conduct assessments for students who may cause potentially dangerous situations. To me, that reads that the parents are going to conduct assessments for students. And I'm sure, and I know that that's not it. I think maybe rewording it a little bit.
That is pulled from the.
I'm sorry?
That is pulled from the law. I can find the citation in the law,
Really?
but that is pulled. That's pulled verbatim from what that piece was. But I will look for that, and I will double check that piece to do that. But I am fairly sure that upon writing that section did come up too, because it's not clear who will do what. But
Yeah.
that is a piece of this. Like Dean said, 97% of this is
Okay.
pieces that would come from.
So I guess my
basically from that
issue is
piece.
with Concord and not, okay, no problem.
But I will look into that for clarification, and
I
I'll
appreciate
see.
that.
I will double check that, but
And
that did come up in committee.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm not losing my mind. Okay,
Well-
good. Stop, okay? And then just, I wouldn't call it grammatical, but just the setup of the outline. There's some inconsistencies in it, and if they could just be cleaned up. Page 3 of 9. Well, actually, if you start at page 2, at the bottom under number 6. A, B, and C all start with intentional physical contact does not include. And then when you go over to page 3 under D and E, that is missing. So just to be consistent, I think we should have that phrase in there.
Thank you.
And
Good catch.
what was the other thing? Oh, on the last page, 9, M. And then letter M, and then number 1 and 2, and then I think it should be lowercase a, b, and c, not uppercase, just in the terms of outline procedure. And then if you could check the Roman numerals under that, I don't know if they're supposed to be capital Roman numerals or lowercase Roman numerals. I forget my outline when it gets past 3 indents. And that's it.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Guglielmi.
Just a couple comments. As it relates to intentional physical contact, I wondered if maybe there was something that might exclude, let's say, the intentional physical contact around a child's head, for example. That there would be a disclaimer that wouldn't necessarily. It's different to grab someone by the arm, but if you grab someone by the head, it's a little different. So I don't know. That was just one thing that came to my mind. Also, on page 3, it talks about the training and the untrained staff. And again, these may be things that are required the way that the language is, but I at least wanted to give you my comments. And I guess my question was, how does the staff know who's trained and who's not trained? But maybe that's just a little deeper than the high level of this policy. But if you needed someone, what is the district doing to ensure that, particularly in something that I would imagine is not all that common on an everyday basis, who would be available and how would they get a hold of that person? So that was another thing that came in mind. Another thing might be some type of a notification, particularly on page 4, where it's talking the prohibition of dangerous restraint techniques. I wonder if there was some kind of a statement or a knowledge that these activities may result in criminal, that maybe it's bigger than just a school policy, that there's many of these things that would cross the line into maybe subject to, I wonder if there's some kind of disclaimer or some kind, I don't know if you know what I'm getting at, but that it's more than just a school policy, that there may be criminal charges based on, because these are, were very actually made me cringe as I was hearing them. They're very uncomfortable for me.
And as I'll point back to something that Attorney Eggert said. He said that this is based on policy. There's things that go on beyond this procedure, or school practices, things like that. Those go way beyond what's here. This is a piece to a much larger system of keeping our children safe. It ties into a lot of our other policies around school safety and our safety teams and our crisis teams and all the other things that we do within the buildings. And this is just kind of an overlay of what this law made us do in policy.
Okay. And then I guess lastly, in the area of reporting on page maybe 6 going into 7, was just regarding the documentation. I know that it says that the parents need to be notified, by the end of that particular day, but I wondered if there was a place for a requirement as part of the policy is documenting, and I'm sure this would probably be done anyways, but I don't see it at least written here, that that it's documented that the parent was spoken to and perhaps even the parent's reaction, so that you have that documentation as part of the record, or at least in the policy for it.
So in this policy, this is an update of our previous policy we had in place. What the legislature did was it added seclusion. So there's much more detail in this than our former policy had, many more pages, as you've heard. And I think in this, our current restraint reporting, our current report, one of those sections is, when did you notify the parent?
Okay.
Who was involved? All the members that were involved in that incident sign off on that. That is our current policy in place now. We will adopt that. One of the requirements in here, it talked about the superintendent having to move forward and having reporting procedures. One of the next step off of this, once we have a policy, is to go over and look at our actual protocols we currently have in place. Those need to be updated along with this policy.
Okay,
once
great.
the policy is in place.
Thank you.
All set? Any other? Vice Chair Barnes?
Actually, two questions, because I really took Dean Eckert's word that this is really just down from Concord, so I'm not going to critique it. But on page 9, item B, and you talk about principals will annually identify staff members who serve as school-wide resources. Are these, do you see those as being some of the same people that help to work toward this policy? So
Yeah.
can you talk a little bit about that for me?
Yes, probably about, I'm going to say 10 years, but I could be off a few years in there, 9 or 10 years. I became a CPI trainer, and I went off and became trained on how to de-escalate students prior to having to physically restrain them. That was one of the things that I did. And since that time of initially being trained, we now have 2 trainers in every building to be able to train staff. We train the trainers. So we conduct annually a new training for anyone who has not been trained in CPI, and then we conduct refreshers every 2 years for anyone who has been trained. And we have a database that we try to maintain very accurately that has all those people within your building that are trained. Our goal is to train as many as we can, and that's why we have kind of continued to do this for a few years now.
Excellent. Obviously, because when you're putting it together, you know how to practice it. So that's why I look at that extension, and it sounds like it's there. The second question is actually more for Marge. I know that we're so connected with the South Central region. We have great lines of communication. And I'm back to documentation again, which is obviously the implementation of a policy. But is there collaboration at all for how policies are documented so we can look? So when we do send kids to, say, Alvern and in Nashua, if something happens there, we can easily respond because it's almost, not mirror image necessarily, but, comparable enough that we can work with it fluidly.
What I would say is I would rely on John as he works with the special ed directors because they get together at Ceresk in the South Central region. All of us are going through this at the same time.
Right.
We've had our last meeting for the year in the South Central region, but certainly we are close to both Hudson and Nashua, the superintendents and the SPED coordinators. So it's certainly something that we can simply ask, is your policy in place yet? We're all in the same boat at the same time. So I think it's a collective share. It's just seeing, and probably the best time to do this would be the end of August, the beginning of September, because I think everyone is just about in the same place. Would you say that based on your work?
Yes, and I would say that Attorney Eggert has been wonderful with providing us with samples, and he's done the workshops that we've attended, and this has been rolling out for about a year now, and it started last summer with a presentation to all the special ed directors across the state, and with that was sample policies and sample protocols, the lack of a better term to use, and procedures to go along with that. So we do have sample forms that all the Southeast region and the directors in the state have that we are working on right now. And it's one of those things where until policy is defined, you can go so far with those procedure pieces. And have rough drafts now. We're working as this works forward, and we have a final document. We'll meet those requirements. The good and the bad, I don't know, but in this, it's pretty clear what needs to be documented and what needs to be identified to parents and for your record keeping, and actually where in the student's file. So the comfort is that other districts will have to follow those same requirements, and they're pretty laid out in this policy.
Excellent. Thank you.
All set? I have first, I might as well just note the minor one, and then I've got some questions. I happen to notice a small typo on page 5, section G in the title. Every other RSA reference doesn't have a colon before the U. That one did. So I'll just get that out of the way. And then I was wondering if on page 6, under section I, training, when we talk about the district shall ensure all appropriate personnel are trained in the use of these restraint procedures and seclusion. Who do we consider to be appropriate staff?
Is that a question you're asking of me, or as a, I guess I need a clarifier on appropriate staff. So
right. So the reason I'm asking, right,
Right.
we're looking to approve a policy, and to me, from a policy perspective, this is vague. There's no definition of who the appropriate personnel are. And so I think that we need to give some thought to it. Ideally, anyone who's working with children on a day-to-day basis ought to be trained in this, right? But we also recognize there's an administrative burden, right, to promptly training everyone. So I would understand why we wouldn't want to say everyone who works with children or define, subsets of our employee base, teachers, paras, behavior specialists. So my concern is the policy is very explicit in terms of the implications of who can perform some of these procedures, right? They need to be trained, and untrained are not authorized to do things when someone trained is available, which also takes me back to that training database that we're trying to maintain. We ought to be sure we've got that thing locked down, right? And we know who's been trained and who hasn't, right? Because now there's RSAs and our own policy that requires us to designate it. So I'm okay if on the next reading you want to come back and perhaps make a suggestion, but it's my feeling right now that all appropriate personnel is vague and subject to interpretation. And perhaps we want to give some more thought to who those folks are and how we know that. And I think that might have been my only other comment after everybody else went through. Is there any other comment? No? Everybody's had their say. You sure? Going once? Going twice? Okay. Thank you very much for the policy. It's extremely comprehensive and, as you noted, highly prescriptive in terms of what was required by the state. Hopefully our feedback is helpful, and we'll look forward to the next reading.
Thank you.
Thank you. And so that takes us to item number 9 on tonight's agenda, request to increase personnel in the Merrimack Early Education Program at James Mastrocola Elementary School. We have 2 returning presenters and a new one. So seated at the table is Director of Special Services, John Fabrizio. I'll invite to the table Principal Emily Carter, and I will also invite Ms. Sheila Damaris. Welcome back to the 2 of you, and welcome to you, Ms. Damaris.
Well, here I am again. As we talked about last year during our budget cycle, we're seeing an increase at our preschool level, which is there's so many benefits to that. I think Mrs. Carter started a presentation off tonight with MES, which was a joy for me to sit there, and they did a wonderful job. And they talked about early learning, and they talked about early literacy, and they talked about the importance of that. And this couldn't play more into that conversation that we have before us, growing population again. And what's interesting this time, we're looking at higher number of 3-year-olds that are identified with needing services. And when that happens, that means longevity for our programs. That means a lot of chance to work with students at a very young age and really put some interventions in place to really help them develop as typically as possible for those students. And I think that is a very nice opportunity. So I'm here before you tonight to tell you that our numbers are continuing to increase, and we are requesting I put forward a couple options to talk about, and I'll begin by talking about those options, and then and talk about some projected numbers, and then I'll refer to kind of Mrs. Demers to talk about kind of how this came about, and then to Mrs. Carter to talk about how would this happen at MES if it was to happen. So to begin, I'm going to begin with numbers. So if I had a handout for you. On the last page, it talks about from 2011 all the way through to 2000, projected to 2015-16. And in that, if you'll notice, we have gone from a total of 80 students in June to a projected next June of 135. And it tells you the growth over the time that we've been involved in preschool at both Reeds Ferry and Master Cole Elementary School. So if we're looking at the biggest increase that we're looking at is within our population of coded students. We're starting off at Master Cola next year with 35 coded students, and then 54 typically developing students is what our projection to be as. And that leaves us, as I talked before, within those limits of trying to keep the maintain where we have typically developing students at about 60% within those programs for being good peer role models for those students with disability. So to begin, a couple of options. We have two options how to solve this dilemma that we face in front of us. One is to increase the 0.5 teacher that we currently have at JMES in our early education program to full-time. And by doing that, we would, first of all, double the salary, and then pay retirement, health insurance, dental insurance, and I provided you some figures to do that, and we're looking at a cost of roughly $67,330.50 to have that first option. The second option would be to hire an additional 0.5 teacher and create another classroom, in another AM classroom. This would be the same cost of salary of $19,699.50, plus the addition of two paraeducators for $10,000 each, which is another $20,000. And then we would need furniture, of course, because we would be adding an additional room. And that would be a total of $53,869.50. The advantage of that second option, I'll say, is that it's incoming third graders that really is that we have the need for coming in. And morning program is much better for that population of students because often our 3-year-olds nap in the afternoon. So it's not the best educational time to have them in our buildings. However, we'll do what we need to do. But however, when I'm looking at option 1 and option 2, they are both options. However, I think that one is probably preferred by our parents and preferred by the 3-year-olds themselves. So I will turn to Ms. Demers, and maybe, Shirley, you can talk about kind of how we came about being where we are and some of the referrals that have happened throughout the year.
Try it again.
Okay.
That
Can you hear
looks
me
better.
now?
Yes.
Okay. Well, this year we did receive referrals for an additional 17 3-year-olds that are turning 3 between May and October. These are students that have what they call individual family service plans right now, so they will need IEPs coming into the program. So generally we don't know who's coming in until we receive that paperwork on each of those students. So based on that, we have an additional 15 to 17 students that will need to enter our program, and most of those parents would like to have their children come in the morning time. And currently we only have 2 classes that have 3-year-olds in them, so a few of our classes have a combination of 3- and 4-year-olds together. But in trying to place all those students into our programs, we would need to currently place them into afternoon programs if we need to, if we don't have another morning program, because the morning programs are pretty full. We are trying to keep numbers in the classes not higher than 14 students and have more typical students coming into the programs to make sure that there is a majority of typical students. The other option would be if we had them in the afternoon, that some of the parents would, for the typical students, would not want their children to be in the afternoon program. We currently have 6 families that are on a waiting list who have afternoon programs who would like the morning programs. So that's another concern. And the other one is currently for the typical children, we have 11 openings for the afternoons at this point. And so it would be difficult if we had another afternoon class to find another 7 or 8 children for that class. So that's the concern. And the state always wants us to have more typical, so we're trying to keep that ratio.
Well, we've seen over and over again the benefits of early intervention, and it's just really remarkable and very exciting. And one of my, Sheila talked about those 2 different options. We, at Mastrocola, we do have the space for another morning classroom. Right now we have 3 classrooms that house our preschool program, and 2 sessions, a morning and an afternoon session, run in 2 of the classrooms, and then we have the halftime position, which is just the morning. So we do have the space to add an additional halftime classroom. I think that really the more the merrier, and the more children that we can draw into this program, you know, the better off our students are going to be prepared to meet our rigorous kindergarten program and so on and so on. So I feel as though the morning program would better serve the population that are wanting to come into the program, into the school, and would hate to lose them to other preschools. So.
Are you open for some questions from the board?
Yes.
Before I open this up, we'll discuss this tonight. We won't be voting on it tonight, so we can honor the 2-week rule. So tonight is really just about getting information out. And I was actually hoping you might clarify something that you said before we get questions. In talking about the space, you said we have 2 classrooms that are running AM and PM preschool, and a 3rd classroom that's running AM preschool. And yet what we're proposing is to have another AM preschool. So is there a 4th classroom?
Yes, we do have space for the 4th classroom.
And what's being done in that classroom now? Is anything being displaced if we were to do this?
No, we are going to get creative with our space, and we can reconfigure certain services together to make that work.
All right.
But we've sat down with a map and have figured that all out if that were to happen.
Okay. All right. Questions? Vice Chair Barnes.
I'm going back to budget time, guys, and I know that at budget time we had to, for the sake of prudency, eliminate preschool facilities at Thornton's. And I guess the question is, with the additional room of furniture, which is budgeted in option 2 at $14,170, would the intent be to keep that 4th space long term, or if the board had the inclination for the next budget cycle to have pre-K at Thornton's, would that furniture then be repurposed down? It would be a lesser impact on the budget.
I think the superintendent has something.
Whoever wants it.
All of us could say it together. It would be fortuitous because we know the board's intent, its vision, is to expand the program to Thornton's Ferry. You said that the next year you would come back. That would be one of the things you would want to do. And in trying to address the needs right now, we would be able to go forward, and we would have already purchased what we need to purchase. So it would simply be moving from one place to the next, or moving from Mastrocola Elementary to Thornton's Ferry Elementary.
I guess the only question I have then, since we're playing the Thornton's game here, what about, there was some, I think, playground furniture as well that would only have to be...
The playground equipment would be the one thing that would need to be addressed, because Mastercola already has its playground equipment, and we would not want to take from Mastercola Elementary, so that would still be a budgetary consideration.
So, but that would really be the only remaining?
That would be correct, because it would be our intention to move personnel and furniture.
Okay. So I'm going to just ask a loaded question here because I'm good at that. What was, maybe off the top of my head, does anyone have an estimate, remember how much the outdoor stuff was, the playground stuff was?
Was it 25?
It was around 25,
25,000.
Yeah.
Okay. And that would be the only thing, staffing would actually shift as well?
As John and I have looked at it, we feel that based on the foreseeable future, it would be moving personnel that would have been employed at Mastercola Elementary School in the year 2015-16 to move to Thornton's Ferry. We would not draw anyone from Reed's Ferry. It would all be from Mastercola Elementary to Thornton's Ferry.
Okay. Would there be anything precluding us from doing that now, other than the $25,000 in outdoor play equipment?
Well, I think right now, Emily and John have gone through and have maxed out the space, and I think it would be better, quite frankly, to, given timing and so on, to play it out at Mastercola, get it worked out, and then that would give Variety the opportunity to work with both John and Emily during this year to make for a much smoother transition. I mean, right now, technically, in our world, it's a little late in the game, and Emily and John have very nicely mapped out, and when Emily says what she's doing is consolidating services, so in other words, if OT and PT were in two separate spots, they're going to be pulled together, or if speech was in one spot, they're going to be pulled together. They're going to be consolidated, but it's not going to be a loss. It overall will be a gain as we look at it.
Okay, because that's, I'm hearing like that you're going to have to make some real adjustments to make this work. So that's why I was wondering if there's any other
But positive adjustments. And I think the other thing is Mastercola Elementary has had preschool. It understands its population. It's very much ready for it. And I think it will give us a nice year where we know what the board's intent is. It will give a great year of preparation. And then we can focus our energies on just the playground.
And it's fair to say that in order to make that work, it's really option 2 that we're talking about, because you would move the half person as opposed to option 1, where we're taking a half-time person and making them full-time, right? We're not going to split that baby, as it were, right? Okay.
Those are my questions. Thanks.
Any other questions? In terms of this proposal and how we pay for it and find the money to support this, where would we go?
So this is another area that Matt and John and I have conferred about. And in 2000, the voters put in place for us a capital reserve fund. And I thought it would be important for you to hear about this capital reserve fund, because this is the direction that we would look to fund this, because we realize we just don't have this sitting around in this next budget. What it actually said is, shall the district vote to establish a capital reserve fund under RSA 35:1 and RSA 35:1-B to meet any unanticipated expenses of educating educationally disabled children, and to name the Merrimack School Board as agents to expend from this fund. We have not tapped into this fund in a very long time, and I've asked Matt to come to the table to help tell us how much is in this fund. It would seem that this would be the place that we would go for this expenditure, because we have this need. It has not been addressed. We need to address it, and it plays to the population that was talked about or referenced. So, Matt.
Yeah, thank you. The warrant article that Marge mentioned was very similar to something that I crafted at my former district before landing on the shores of Merrimack. And when I first came here, I looked through all your capital reserve funds, and I went and I researched the document that created them. Some went back to like 1977, some went back, so I wanted to make sure what they said and what they could be used for. And when I looked at this, it looked very familiar, and it's like, this is exactly what I did when I was over in Jaffrey Ridge. And I was pleased that it wasn't specific to out-of-district placements only or everything like that. It was to meet the unanticipated needs of special education in the broader sense. And right now in that fund, we have $496,000 for your use to meet those needs.
Mr. Powell.
I have two questions. First is a procedural question. You said that we were going to take information on it and then follow our traditional 2-week rule, but the problem is that there's 2 options. So what are we pushing forward to the next 2 weeks?
Well, so we can certainly discuss and move one of the options at our next meeting.
Okay, that's fine.
Or if the board chose to vote on an option tonight, but I'd rather not, right? I'd rather really, in the observance of the 2-week rule, not to vote on an option and then put it on consent.
I just wanted
the same, frankly, as voting
I just
on
wanted to
it
get some
tonight.
clarification that it wasn't automatically going to go on consent.
No.
Okay, perfect, thank you. And then the second comment that I have, question is in regards to using the money out of the capital reserve fund that we just talked about. I think I would need a little more information before I could support that, because this was set up, as you read, Marge, for special education students, unanticipated needs of special education students. However, we're going to have more than a majority of special needs students that are going to be serviced by this new configuration.
And I would just respond, they pay tuition to attend, and it is...
The typical students
That's
pay
correct.
tuition to attend.
That's correct.
Okay.
And I think we have preschool because we need to have preschool to address this population. And one of the elements is you must have typical children. You must have more than, by at least, what, 1 or 2. I mean, you've got to have more than. So it's very specific what you have to do. So it's that
exactly.
It's that
Right.
population that's targeted, and with it comes the general ed population who pay tuition. So it still addresses the educating the educationally disabled, if you will, or the special ed child.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Ms. Gualiumi.
So the amounts provided, does that minus the tuition of the, I mean, is what, there's a certain amount to increase the, let's option A, option B.
Revenue.
But then there's a certain amount of revenue that comes in from the typical students. Does this amount include the revenue, or is the revenue?
We take...
Mr.
Can I
Chevino,
answer?
go ahead.
Yeah. This is the gross cost of the program right here. The revenue comes in on the revenue side. That's how it's separated. So this is not net. This is gross budget, which is what we have to abide by the law. RSA 32 is gross budgeting, Municipal Budget Act. So this is the full cost of the program. And on the revenue side, for this coming tax rate season, I could put in, if there were an additional X amount of paying students coming in, we could do that calculation and put that in as tuition.
And then could that go back to the?
What do you mean go back?
It wouldn't go back to the program, would offset the tax
Okay,
impact
okay,
of
yep,
the
okay.
program.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thanks.
Mr. Powell.
I guess that just kind of expands my question. If this entire amount, if this gross amount is also to service non-special needs students, how can we take that money out of the special needs, or out of the special education fund?
Because part of this program requires that a certain number of typical students be enrolled in the program,
Right.
1-to-1 or
And I
greater
totally
than.
understand that, but my understanding of the fund when we set it up back in 2000 was it was for a transfer student coming in from another district that we didn't know was coming, and we needed to have money immediately available in order to service that student.
However, when you read the body of the warrant article, it says to meet unanticipated needs of the special education department. And the unanticipated part, which you're working through right now and I was working through, is the increase in enrollment, correct? That's unanticipated. So that's your unanticipated cost.
Yeah.
I think I would feel more comfortable with, if you haven't done so already, having some, legal take a look at it to make sure that we're able to do it. Because I can just, farther down the road, I can see someone raising the question. If I've thought of it, someone else is going to think of it. And I just want to make sure we're on solid ground and not putting ourselves in a situation where we're going to have to defend our actions.
Good advice for our next meeting, to have a rendering. I guess my take on it is that the preschool program exists solely for the needs of the special needs students. The fact that typical students attend the school as part of the delivery of those services is just a component of the program. And so this cost wouldn't be borne, it wouldn't exist if we weren't delivering the preschool in order to service special needs kids.
And I totally get that, and I totally understand it.
Yeah.
However, I'm sure you can agree in what I'm saying, in that there's a piece of this that is not servicing special needs.
Right.
And that's by statute, another one of these local control things, that we have to provide it.
Yeah.
If you were able to tell me, as Cinda asked, if at the end of the year, the money that was, this startup fund, if you will, this gross amount, whatever monies were allocated would be proportionally for the typical student would be put back into the special education fund, I'd have no problem with that whatsoever. But if it's just being returned to the general fund, I have a problem with that.
Yeah.
That's what happens today, though.
But we're not taking that out of the special needs fund, or the special education fund, rather. I'm sorry.
Yes.
Is it even an option?
Right.
That we could do
It's
that?
It's not an option. The only way I can put money back into that fund is by vote of the people.
And that's what I thought.
Right.
And I guess that's why I would feel
here,
more comfortable if we get someone just from legal just to look at it.
Yeah.
Vice Chair Barnes.
I was going to ask along these lines. I know that we've had a large number of retirements this year, larger than I was expecting, actually. We've been very busy. That being said, outside of the additional room of furniture, which I think would make complete sense for this fund, is there room with the salary differences to possibly do that, or is that not?
When Matt and I have conferred, we don't think, even though you're seeing a larger number than we planned on, so on, predominantly we're operating at the secondary level and not as much at the elementary level, meaning a lot of the content areas that are specific at the high school level are going to come in at a higher number. So we already have a number that we need to meet for you, which I think is about $260,000. We're not sure about that. That is our number one focus. We think if we look at this $54,000 approximately, we don't feel good about that. That's why we felt that this particular reserve fund was a much better thought.
Okay, that's fair enough.
No, we appreciate you asking that because we've been there.
Yeah,
as
because
well.
that calculation won't be able to be made with specificity and certainty until I actually take a look at the salaries, of course, and then I take a look at the benefit plans. If through retirement I lost a single, but through rehiring, I gain somebody lower on the scale, but they're taking a family plan, then I've just balanced the two out and I haven't saved any money. So that's the analysis that has to happen, and that portion has not been put into the system yet, or people haven't enrolled in their health plan insurance yet. So I don't know that.
Yeah. And we as a board at budget time decided to take those savings that typically occur year over year in retiring more senior folks and hiring junior people as a change in budgeting practice that got us a lower budget. But the thing that it took away, and we all acknowledged, was the flexibility sometimes that those savings afforded us
And we
in
took
terms
a
of other
we
expenditures.
took a pretty aggressive stance on that
Yeah.
one.
Any other questions on the proposal and request? Okay. Thank you very much for the presentation and the multiple presentations tonight.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you. And that takes us to item number 10 on tonight's agenda, review Health Trust application and membership agreement with the Merrimack School District. Superintendent Chaffrey.
Thank you. So the last time the board was asked to go through this process was in 2008. And you can see that the expectation by Health Trust is that the governing body will look at the documents and go through another formal approval process, which it calls the updated application and membership agreement. So within this, you have an outline of the updated changes that would have been made from the last time to this time. You can see that a certificate of authorizing authority needs to be turned over by an authorized official, which in this case would be that the governing board, the school board, adopts it. The chairman of the board would sign it, and then you'll see that's on page 4 of 5. The certificate of authorizing resolution. And then on page 5 of 5, there's another place for the chairman of the board to sign, and also 2 places for my name to go as the superintendent. It's to execute and deliver the application and membership agreement. So the board takes a stand, if you will, on given date, and then I not only deliver it, but also then execute it. So you have all of its aspects from not only the membership agreement, you have the COBRA agreement, you have their agreement for retirees, and you have its most current bylaws. So you have all the documentation from Health Trust. My thought was tonight that after you had a read of this, if there were any questions you would have, I would try and get answers for you. If we need our benefits specialist to come, I would welcome that. We have to have an answer to this document before August 1st. The beauty is we have 2 other board meetings between now and then, both June 15th and one in July. So this is getting it on the table for your review.
Great. Are there any questions? Mr. Powell.
I read through this summary of changes was very helpful, and I read through them. My only question and concern is there any significant is there any change whatsoever to the benefits that we're able to offer to our employees by signing this new contract?
I would say, based on what I know, no. And it's an important enough question to be sure of that by asking our benefits specialist, who we'll be with on Wednesday. So,
And I guess one of the questions that perhaps might be important to know is what are our options if we don't renew the membership agreement? well, we're being asked to do something. We should know what our options are, right? Are there any other questions? Or just making sure he was paying attention. Vice Chair Barnes.
I guess my question is, because I think, and maybe I missed it, the term of the agreement, but it's going to fall into the time where we deal with things like Cadillac taxes, correct? And I'm not sure I saw anything, because I perused it, that addresses, you know.
I think that's there in this document.
Okay.
So, if you were looking for it.
I'm looking for basically, you know, with the agreement, and of course we talk about rates and amounts, and knowing what that can do, you know, to our exposure.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess the question is, has there been any communication about how that will be addressed through Health Trust? And that's our problem. It's our tax problem.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, are they going to would they have the flexibility to do things like change policies on their end to be able to work under that benchmark? So if we're locking ourselves there, we're locking ourselves in to policies and plans that subject us to a Cadillac tax, or will it give us the flexibility to shop other plans? And do they offer other plans that we could shop that would afford us the avoidance?
So what I would say that I think would be beneficial is to probably have Debbie Clayton, our benefits specialist, here at the meeting on June 15th. I think the questions you raise are important enough that I'm not going to give an answer when this is not my area of expertise, and this is what she does all the time. So the good thing is we've started early enough so that if we need her here once or twice, that can happen. I think our intention also was that we would have her in September to do a general overview about important insurance elements that would be good for you to know before you go into collective bargaining, and to also invite the Merrimack Teachers Association to come that evening too. So we'd have an education session, and I think it would be beneficial to our public too to realize what we are collectively up against, where it's become such an important topic. So let's put that over to the side. That's really about what might come from a benefits point of view. This is about the membership agreement itself, its application, and I want you to have your answers met. So I will take those that you've raised up, give them off to her, and ask her to be here on the night of the 15th of June, which would still give you another time to take a look-see, because we could address it in July.
All set with questions? Excellent. We will move on now then to item number 11, summer school board meeting dates. Freudian slip, summer school. Superintendent Chaffrey.
Thank you. So once again, as I want to do, I conferred with Chairman Ortega about the notion of having one board meeting in July and August. That seems to have worked out rather well in our immediate past. And so then I just went forward, came up with these two dates, trying to do a equidistant spacing, if you will, from where we leave off. We leave off on June 15th. Notice a potential July 13th and then August 17th, so just about a month out. So what I need to know is if these two dates meet your needs, because obviously we need to have a quorum on those evenings. So maybe I should say, is there anyone who could not attend those particular dates? Oh my goodness. Oh.
Ms. Walyumi.
I may have a difficult time on the July 13th. I have like 2 days when I get back from vacation before my son goes to camp. So that's a little tricky. It's not impossible, but it's not as solid as, let's say, the 17th. That works really well for me.
And I had, just for everyone's information, in preparation for the meeting, I checked with Andy, and he thought that these dates were good for him. But Otherwise, it looks like we have one potential conflict.
So if it's all right, if we've got 4, we'll just forge ahead? Yes? Thank you.
Thank you. So that takes us to item number 12, other correspondence. Correspondence. I was copied on 2 emails since our last meeting from parents regarding their students' situations. One was at the upper elementary school and one was at the high school. Is there any other correspondence?
Didn't we receive something regarding some alleged online petition for a reinstatement of a non-rehire, or I mean, a non-rehire?
I received a phone call and an email from the union leader related to that in relation to a petition, which I have not actually received.
Okay.
No. Any other correspondence to come before the board? All right, we'll move on to comments. Mr. Powell.
I just wanted to let everyone know that I had a discussion with the superintendent this evening, and at our next meeting of the Healthcare Cost Containment Committee on Wednesday, I'm going to approach the director to find out if there are any open spots on their board of directors for the upcoming term and petition for it. I think that we are a large enough member of this trust that we should have some sort of representation in there, and also find out exactly what is going on. I think it would be to our benefit if I was able to do that. So whatever happens, I will let you know.
Wonderful. Any other comments? I would share that, let's see, week before this past Wednesday, I attended the mock DUI that was conducted on O'Gara Drive, sponsored by the Students Against Destructive Decisions, of which our student rep is a part, and was extremely impressed by everything that took place that day. The simulation was acted out by students very, very effectively, and the presentation which was given to seniors was, in my opinion, couldn't have been more realistic. It was very, very moving, very powerful, and I would certainly expect, hopefully, stuck with the kids. It certainly stuck with me. On top of that, I think it also demonstrated what the Mastrocola team here was talking about earlier, and the very tight connections between groups within the town. The mock DUI couldn't have been put on without Bailey's Automotive. Jim Bailey has really spearheaded this for the past 15 years. Dan Bantham from State Farm Insurance, Rivette Funeral Home, our police force in numbers, our fire and rescue, and what you see before you is the immediate aftermath of a crash, and it really was like you were there. So the fact that all these folks came together to do this for the students, I thought was very, very powerful, and I was glad that I attended. Any other comments from the board? Okay, that'll take us to number 13, new business. Any new business? That takes us now to item 14, committee reports. Vice Chair Barnes.
No, I don't go last.
You,
Who's got one first?
oh, that's
She goes first.
well, and maybe tonight the first shall be last. Okay, go ahead, Ms. Burley.
So, Mr. Ortega kind of stole my thunder with the mock DUI, but I just want to second him in saying how very moving and emotional the whole entire presentation was. And I just want to recognize Renee Murray. who is the president of SAD, she worked tirelessly to make sure everything was perfect, and it was definitely a very moving performance, and I definitely suggest that at some point that y'all go see it. Also, National History Day participants are going to DC during finals week, which is June 15th to the 19th. Prom was last Friday, and before everyone was dismissed for prom, they had Junior Impact, which is a smaller version of the mock DUI. It's just presentations about drunk driving and addiction. For our senior project, Wes Nodder is executing the plans for redoing the senior courtyard, which is right across from the cafeteria. Austin Thompson designed the new patio and walkway, and it will be in memory of Sean Moran. This week, Student Council is holding elections for Student Council Executive Board and General Member, as well as the class officers. And seniors will be signing out Monday the 8th, and senior week will follow, ending, of course, in graduation on the 13th.
She says with a smile. All right, would you like to go now, Vice Chair Barnes? Okay, Ms. Guglielmi, we'll go in order.
Okay, so Parks and Rec met on May 20th, and a couple of things. First of all is this dog park fundraising event that's going on so basically it's through PetSafe. There was a lot of hype around it last year, so I want to continue to encourage people to go and give the vote for Merrimack. Merrimack could get $100,000 for a dog park, so whether you have a dog or not, it's for the whole town, and it's some pretty good dollars associated with that, and I think we have a really good shot of making it. In order to do that, if you go to www.petsafe.net/bark for your park, and you get up to 2 votes a day. Secondly, there's going to be park inspection visits. The committee assigned various representatives or committee members to be able to go to all of the local park inspection parks and basically report back on repairs that are needed and such. And so that will be reviewed at the next committee meeting, which will be on June 10th, to basically consolidate all of that feedback regarding the parks that any little thing that needs attention. Also, Camp Natticook, they're accepting enrollments it begins on June 23, so not that Monday right after school gets out, because a lot of the teachers, there's a number of teachers in the district that end up helping out at Camp Natticook, so I think the first day it would be that Tuesday, the 23rd. And that's all I have.
Great, thank you. Mr. Powell.
On May 22nd, the Town Center Committee met, and of relevance to the school, there was some discussion around safe routes to school, and I had a meeting set up with our liaison to the National Regional
Planning Commission.
Thank you. And for some reason, it wasn't on my calendar, and I missed it, so I need to get back with Matt and reschedule that to find out where we're at with anticipated monies and such.
Vice Chair Barnes.
Okay, now I feel like it's my turn. On Tuesday the 26th, the district parent group met, and we did our annual end-of-the-year roundtable of fundraising success stories by school and also learning opportunities for future efforts. They really do a good exchange of ideas, what works, what didn't work for them, amounts of money raised, and so they really kind of get an idea of expectations and how they're meeting their goals. I mean, the middle school has the no fundraiser, so you just basically, if you don't want the catalog sent to your house, you keep up the work with just give them $10 and they'll leave you alone, which is totally cool with me because I'll have 2 middle schoolers next year. So I already sent my check. Also, highlights on what was funded by some of the programs that they run, the fundraisers. So things like the James Mastrocola Upper Elementary School, that's probably stood out the most because their Artist in Residence was funded by the district, their parent group at JMUS, and it will be a mural that will be built over a couple of years using the students and the district, or the Artist in Residence that was hired, and it will actually be at the entrance where on voting day, the main entrance where you come in by the school office. So it'll be the first thing that our visitors will see coming in. So it's a return on investment that will pay dividends for years to come. The first time this in ever, Ceresco will be hosting summer programs. And that was something that was brought to our attention by Michelle Watson, who is the district's special needs parent group. And it offers a lot of things like robotics, like space programs. It really has some Lego programs and some computer programs. And if you go to the Ceresco website, and I don't have the URL with me, but I believe it will be on the district parent group Facebook page at least. But they have some wonderful programs, about 12 students a session. So they have morning, afternoon, and in some cases you can do both. And it'll give your student an enriched academic and environmental opportunity this summer that they're doing for the first time. So it had a lot of exciting uptick for us, and definitely for all students to consider.
Great. So that now takes us to item number 15, public comments on agenda items. Seeing none, we'll close public comment, take a moment to sign the manifest, and I will entertain a motion to enter non-public session per RSA 91-A:3, Roman numeral 2, sections A, B, and C, made by Ms. Guagliumi, seconded by Mr. Powell. Ms. Guagliumi, how do you vote?
In favor.
Mr. Powell?
In favor.
Vice Chair Barnes?
In favor.
And the chair votes in favor. Thank you, everyone. Good night.